Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Tim Kalinowski. He's Chief Creative Officer, and he's also president. We're going to talk about all the work as he's done, president of LORE, transformational brand strategist and storyteller. And it's going to be a really fascinating conversation around customer experience, story, creating memorable brand stories. So, Tim, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we connected through Podmatch and briefly talk about your journey, your story, how you came to be doing what you're doing, and we'll dive right into the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. A long time ago, I was actually in business school, wanted to be an entrepreneur, and somewhere along the lines, I found my way into marketing and communications and just absolutely fell in love with it. So for more than 25 years, I have been deeply involved in the world of branding with large companies, General Electric, Kohler, Mercury Marine, Miller Coors, and help them all shape their stories. When Lore was founded in 2015, the idea was we wanted to tell great stories, and that was brought on based on years of work in agencies and years of work in corporations. And I remember sitting in boardrooms cringing at what stories people were trying to tell. The brands that I worked on were their accurate stories, and they were often inaccurate, unauthentic, and the way that we went about it was just a waste of money. And so Lore was supposed to be the antithesis to that. How can we be efficient, save people money, but also tell great stories that were really authentic and meaningful? I lost you.
Oh, and in your experience, what are the essential elements that make a brand story impactful and memorable?
So the things to make a story the most impactful are: one, be authentic, tell the real story. Don't try to polish it too much. Don't try and make it something that it's not. The other thing that's critically important, and I see this as an obstacle for most businesses, they try to make it about themselves and they lose the critical ingredient, which is it has to be about your customer. I've worked with hospitals and doctors before, and I've seen them do wonderful videos and content about patients, but ultimately they have the patients talking about their business, which seems to be the right thing to do. But what's missing is, how did those treatments and how did that business impact that person's life, impact their health? And there's nothing wrong with them being honest about how it impacted them. And that's usually the missing ingredient. If it's too far towards the business or the product, you've gone too far the wrong way. It's got to be about your customer. They'd have to be first.
Yeah, really interesting. And the other question I have for you is, it's all about the customer and kind of contrast between old traditional ways of creating brand stories. I think the iconic giants, Disney or Coca-Cola or Pepsi, they created really impactful brand stories. But in this day and age, with social media, we'll talk about AI a little bit, but how is social media changing the way to make a brand story?
Back to that authenticity point. So what most people don't think of is, one of the subtle truths about a brand is it's a series of patterns, right? If you have a pattern to how your brand is created, you can replicate that and it becomes something that's very aware. Examples like Target or Northwest, Southwest Airlines, they do a great job of always being consistent with who they are. And Southwest is an example. When you talk about social media, they're consistent, they have a consistent voice, and they've done a great job over time helping that to manage what's happening. Wendy's is another one. Everybody, if you don't follow anybody, follow Wendy's. They do a great job. The reason that's so important, that the pattern of consistency, is no matter what comes up, you've built in an answer for it. You've built in a consistency to what content you're creating, and that makes you more authentic. That makes you more recognizable. It helps people be very aware of who you are, and it makes your message resonate more. Because one of the old sales techniques is that you rarely sell something on your first interaction with somebody. It usually takes anywhere from 5 to 7, even 11 times for somebody to see you and understand what's going on. So if your message is all over the place, if your social media is all over the place and it's not consistent, it doesn't have those patterns in it, you're going to fail, because people won't know who you are and how to take you seriously.
Yeah, great advice. And I was also in this day and age, because, if you talked about some of the major brands that you were referencing, like Target or Wendy's, what was interesting is they have these multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns. And what was interesting was when Gary Vee or, these social media influencers came on, they broke the veil. A lot of social media influencers, all they do is they take out a camera, they may step out of bed, and they're recording for their audiences. And those have gotten tons more engagement and views compared to the standard. So why is that?
Again, authenticity, right? There's certainly a place for well-produced content, and it does have value. But there's also something to be said for being short. We like to call it snackable content, things that you can do quick, things that we can replicate very easily. It resonates with people. It doesn't always have to be some perfect polished thing where every word and every phrase is thought through and over created and over crafted. People want that authenticity. They want to see the raw truth. And sometimes when it's overproduced, it seems like you're trying to hide something.
My next question is talk about, how can brands innovate creatively while staying grounded in data-driven marketing?
I'm a big proponent of data, but when I think of data, I want to look at how I can use that data to be more creative. And I've had conversations with my teams multiple times about this. Don't let data become the crutch that tells you that you shouldn't be creative or that you shouldn't do something. Look at the data, break it down, and find new and interesting ways to let your creative energy flow through what you're producing, because the answer is probably there. We use it all the time. Even when we're advertising for ourselves, we call it a sprint test. We do it with clients, we do it ourselves, and we will send messages out and we'll test them. We want to know what's working, and we look at the data and we're trying to see what resonates, what's working, what isn't working, and how we change it.
Yeah, I really love that approach. And same thing with the podcast, and just I'm always testing new content, and then just putting it out there, seeing how people respond to it, always getting feedback and just trying new models. So AI is the buzzword, and really no conversation these days is without mentioning AI. So where do you feel that AI is in this area, and like, how are you positioning yourselves, and how are you thinking about AI in this new day and age?
There's no doubt it has a place. The analogy I like to give people is, I'm just old enough to remember when computers were just starting to be used in communications, advertising, marketing, and people went, "Oh yeah, we'll still do things the old way." And that didn't last long. And then as the internet became more and more prevalent, people were still fighting, hey, we're still going to need a lot of print. That kind of evolved around somewhere else. Digital cameras, video cameras, all of those things. I remember being on shoots and directing shoots, and we're sending out film to get back the next morning to look at negatives and things like that. AI is just another progression in the toolbox that we as marketers have to use, and it's not going away. Anybody that thinks it is, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's going to be here for a while. For us, ideas are still king. And while I have all confidence, and I've seen it work multiple times with my own staff, where we just have an incredible creative team, we'll absolutely use it to cross-check and double-check some of our ideas. We'll use it sometimes to spark new ideas or find different ways to attack a problem and rethink it. I don't think it's quite to a point yet where, despite everybody's best efforts, that you can just abandon normal critical thinking and just rely 100% on AI. But it is absolutely a tool to refine what you're doing and come up with interesting ways to attack a problem.
Do you think that AI is going to get so good that basically it's going to replace like the Gen AI? And for example, I used to have a huge team of editors do my social media, but now with software, I cut almost 20 to 30% of my costs, and my output went up 3 or 4x. Do you think AI or Gen AI is going to really displace people in marketing?
So that's an interesting question. I do think long term there's a potential for that to happen right now. But it's funny, I was looking at so many of the tools are automated right now, and there's a reliance that the AI is going to be correct. What I'm finding is it's not always correct or as refined or as good the quality standard that I may have for something. I've seen posts. In fact, I get asked all the time to be a contributor to something on LinkedIn, and I was looking at some of the other contributor responses, and I realized those were all AI generated, and you can very much tell that they're AI generated. Even though it's proper English and it reads well, it doesn't read with an authenticity that currently a human voice would have, or somebody who's really writing it is going to have some flaws in it. There might be something awkward to it. There might be an idea that doesn't feel quite out of the can. It's a little more out of the box, so to speak. So I don't think it's 100% there. I think in 5 years or 10 years, we're going to look back and marketing and advertising will have completely revolutionized how it's approached and created.
Interesting perspective. A follow-up question I have for you is, using these marketing tools and tactics and strategies, what are your current thoughts on trends in marketing success and creative brand development and storytelling? Like, how is storytelling evolving to keep audiences engaged, to keep them captivated? What are you seeing?
That's a few questions in there. Let's take the storytelling one first. The more things change, the more they stay the same is an ethos that I have with this. So we can use new terminology as things change, but ultimately we're still talking about a lot of the same things. So when we talk about how stories are told and how things are changing, I'm not sure that if you're telling a story has changed. Being able to tell a story is still something that will never go out of style. It's always going to be the right thing to do. Knowing how to tell a good story is the other part of that question. So I don't know that AI will necessarily change that. In terms of tools that are out there, there's a lot of great tools. We use a lot of tools. They're just not quite there yet. They're close.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this conversation. And I have one follow-up question is, talk about adapting brand narratives to evolving consumer expectations. One thing that's really interesting is the consumer is always changing. And so how can brands stay agile and adapt their narratives as consumer behaviors and expectations evolve?
So that's an interesting question. I don't know that I completely agree. Some of the things that we've seen statistically that we know are accurate. Brand loyalty is lower than it's been. 20 years ago, you could have a really strong brand, and if your customers were loyal to it, that was all that mattered. Right now, there's a level of cynicism that I see just within all customers, and I think that's driving so much of these changes that we're talking about, or customers evolving. I think it's less about an evolution of the customer necessarily. I think the customer at their core still wants the same thing. They want an honest product or service. They want to have a voice in it. They want to understand what it is. And ultimately, we call it the aha moment, but it's that moment that a customer sees themselves with your product or service where they go, wow, okay, I really need that. That will impact my life in a positive way. And that in and of itself is the core of everything that we do. And I think that's what we believe more than anything is you have to find that aha moment where you're really helping somebody understand how your product or service is going to benefit them or how their life will change in a good way for it. That's the universal truth that I'm saying. I don't know that I completely believe that customers have changed. However, one caveat to that, as I was saying, is as people have become more cynical, it's up to us to be honest and truthful and not give them a reason to doubt you, because that's really where that brand loyalty comes from. Because right now, if your product or service delivers what it says it's going to deliver, your story shows them how it impacts their life, their family, you will always come out ahead. If you're not doing those things, no amount of marketing or twisting or changing is going to help you.
How can people find out more about you and reach out to you, check out the great work that you're doing, and connect with you?
Our website is loretold.com, LORETOLD.com, or you can reach out to me at LinkedIn, Timothy Kalinowski.
Excellent. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and keep up the great work. And it was really great to talk with the Chief Creative Officer.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out.